Max Ralph. That's Johnny McGonigal. We are here for the Blue White Breakdown on this lovely Thursday afternoon. Johnny, I think when I woke up this morning, it was in the low 40s in State College. So fall weather is definitely here. But look, there was some big news coming out of Penn State practice last night, and we're gonna hit on that. And I just gotta say, like, the vibes are pretty low right now around the Nittany Lions. We talked to James Franklin, and somebody asked him, "It's like, you talk often about how good bowl games are for team morale, for chemistry, for everything. Is this going west almost like a bowl trip? Is this something where you can get away, focus on yourselves, get a win? Like, is this good for you?" And he just kind of flatly said, like, "Yeah, it's a good time to get out of town." And like the whole time, he just seemed down. It's the vibes are down. And of course, Johnny, that includes the fact that the Penn State has apparently lost Tony Rojas to an injury for presumably the rest of the season. And so yeah, I hope you're doing better, Johnny. But the vibes around Penn State are certainly not great.
Yeah, I can imagine that going out west, it would be a good time to do that. Although it is beautiful out. I mean, here in Philly, I like earlier this morning, I walked out, felt that crisp. I was
Yeah,
like, hell yeah, we're so back.
yeah.
But I imagine that crisp is a little crispier in State College right now. Yeah, the vibes are understandably not great. I mean, we even without Tony Rojas's injury, like that, like a loss like that to Oregon, the way it happened in the whiteout, going from the highest of highs, before that game, I honestly had never heard that place louder. Maybe Grant Haley will score, like maybe that play was louder, but in terms of a pregame atmosphere, that place was jumping, and then to end in like the silence that it ended on, and then that drags through the week. Like James Franklin has talked all the time about not letting one loss turn into two, not letting it linger, all that. But like that's just human emotion. That's just like that's natural. And then you get hit with an injury like Tony Rojas, being out for an extended period of time, like you said, presumably the rest of the season. It's a long term injury. There was one position really on this team that they couldn't afford, or at least specifically on the defense, that they could not afford to have a guy go down. Linebacker was thin as is, and now you lose a player who we talked throughout the preseason and throughout even the early stages of this season about how important he was to Jim Knowles' defense, that 4-2-5 scheme, and how important he was from a playmaking standpoint, how good we thought he was going to be, and how good he really was, through these first four games. And so it's a massive, massive loss for this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Like, if there was a position where Penn State couldn't lose somebody, it's linebacker.
Yeah.
There's an argument as well for defensive end.
Yeah.
If they lost to Dennis Sutton, that would probably be worse. But Tony Rojas was right up there as far as top five, maybe three players that Penn State could not lose this season, and it's happened. Credit to him for being a warrior against Oregon. He went out early in the game with what looked like some bumps and bruises, came back and played 70 snaps. And I mean, he was just fantastic to start this season. He and Amari Campbell both clearly thriving in Jim Knowles' defense. The athleticism that we've always known about Tony Rojas really was on display. I mean, flying around the field, in coverage, in the backfield, doing a lot of great things. And this is gonna hurt because now you're looking at Dom DeLuca primarily as the replacement there, but then beyond Dom, who look, Dom's steady. I mean, he's played a lot of football here, but he simply doesn't have the star potential that Tony Rojas does. He's not going to make as many solid plays. He does have a knack for the football. We've seen that. He's got a pick six in his. He's got 5 interceptions in his career and 2 forced fumbles. Like, he has a knack for the ball, but as far as like pure linebacking goes, certainly not the ceiling that Tony Rojas has. And behind him, it's really barren. I mean, Keon Wiley is a guy that in his career has had some hype, could contribute, but we've not ever really seen much of him because last year we thought maybe he could take a step. He had a season-ending injury in the offseason. You look at a guy like maybe Dakari Nelson, who made the switch to the position last year, but just never hasn't really taken off there. Was doing it a little bit more in Tom Allen's defense when there were more 3 linebacker looks and he could play out to the field. And then behind them, the 2 guys that James Franklin pointed out that I think are interesting to keep an eye on are Alex Tash and Cam Smith, a pair of freshmen who James said, look, we're going to have conversations about green lighting them. And I mean, it's what you got to do. Tash kind of burst onto the scene after the Villanova game. Jim Knowles is saying, yeah, this is a guy we want to get involved. Certainly has the size and the traits. But Smith was not a guy we'd really heard anything about, and just kind of got to hear his name for the first time last night. And then of course Anthony Specca, who is up there. But Johnny, it's a concern right now, and nobody behind Dom DeLuca so far this season, and this includes the 3-game non-conference slate against cupcake teams. Nobody has played more than 50 snaps this year, so this is dire.
It is, and Dom DeLuca, like, this is not us crapping on him, right? Like, he's a solid player. Like, he has made some big plays over the course of his career. Obviously, a vet, a captain, a guy that is well respected in the locker room, and I think he was perfect in the role that he was going to be asked to play this year as that third linebacker, as the guy who come in heavy packages, stop the run, short yardage, or spell, Tony Rojas or Amari Campbell. And that partnership between Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas was expected to be like literally the backbone, like, the heart in a lot of ways of this Jim Knowles defense. And so without Tony in there, it's not great. It's really like the way I look at this injury, in a vacuum, it's like, okay, were they going to lose or win at Ohio State with or without Tony? Like, there's a lot of things other than Tony Rojas that go into whether or not they can beat the Buckeyes. Figuring out the offense, Drew Allar playing well in a big game, Nick Singleton figuring his stuff out, the offensive line figuring it out. There's a lot to get into there that I know that you and Bob discussed at length on Monday.
Yeah.
There's a lot this team needs to figure out between now and November 1st when it plays at Ohio State. But you would certainly like to have Tony Rojas in the middle of that defense when you're tasked with going up against the defending national champions on the road, no less. So between the loss to Ohio State, the loss to Oregon, I'm already getting ahead of myself. The loss to Oregon and the loss of Tony Rojas, like, I feel like it's fair to say, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun here or getting too doom and gloom, but I think the trajectory of this season has shifted, a good bit, or at least where we thought Penn State might be, because we both picked Penn State to beat Oregon, and we certainly didn't expect Tony Rojas to pick up this injury. And so now we're looking at a team that, obviously they need to split at least, between Ohio State and Indiana and win the rest of their games, finish 10-2 and get into the playoff. That's kind of the discussion right now, is you lose to Oregon and then you lose one of your best defensive players. Now it's about getting into the playoff as opposed to, and seeing if you can make a run from there, as opposed to before the season, a lot of people, including me, thought this team would be, 11-1, 12-0, possible Big Ten title winners and number 1 overall seed and on the path to a national championship. I do think those expectations change a little bit. They have to really after that Oregon game, and certainly, Rojas losing him is a part of that.
I most certainly am still in the camp that Penn State will make the playoff, at least on
so
paper. I think the team, even after losing Rojas, even after losing to Oregon, I do think that they should beat Indiana, as good as Indiana has looked. Like, this is still the Penn State team that we thought had so much talent. They've just got some stuff they got to work through. But I will say, Johnny, like, being out at practice last night and the way James Franklin talked to us on Monday and Wednesday night, like, I can't necessarily remember a time when the vibes felt this low. It was kind of weird. Maybe it's just a business-like approach. Like, hey, we know this UCLA team is a mess. We're going to go out there, get our job done, win by 1 billion, and move on. But it was definitely like things just kind of felt like quiet and a little different. I mean, it definitely compares, I would say, to like the 2021 season, which was my first year on the beat. When you lose at Iowa, and then you lose I think it was 4 straight after that, and you end up 7-5, and lose in the Outback Bowl as well. Because that obviously just was not a successful year. But there have been some moments this week where it just, I don't know. It definitely hit them hard, because I think everybody thought Penn State, everybody on the roster at least, thought they could win that game against Oregon, and then you go and lose. I mean, just simply one of your best players on defense, and it's really tough. But you got to move on, and I do think Penn State is fortunate in that the game this weekend is against a dumpster fire of an opponent.
Yeah, that certainly helps. Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I don't think this team is not a playoff team. Just because they lost to
Yeah.
Tony Rojas and lost to Oregon. I mean, every week I do CFP
Mhm.
projections, and I was holding firm on my preseason prediction that they would win the Big Ten and be the number 1 seed in the CFP prior to that Oregon game. Obviously, had to adjust that. I've got them being a 7 seed. Because I do think they finished 10-2. Like
Yeah.
I think, sticking to my preseason prediction of them losing at Ohio State, I still think that happens. But
Same here.
that they win the rest of their games, they finish 10-2. That win over Indiana, if they are able to get it, will be really good. I
Mhm.
mean, Indiana is going to be ranked at that point. Not sure where they'll be ranked, but they also just blew out Illinois a couple weeks ago by 53 points, and I think Illinois is a pretty good team. So I think Penn State will be a playoff team if they finish 10-2. There's also going to be a lot of SEC teams that are going to be 10-2, even 9-3, that are going to be pushing for at-large bids this year. Just the way that it's working out, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU all have 1 loss already. So I think a 10-2 team, for Penn State safely gets into the playoff. It's just a matter of what you are when you get there. And I also don't want to, I don't know, like, Tony Rojas is a big miss. It's a big absence. But if that's like, if this team goes like 9-3 or something, like, they can't blame and say, oh, it's because we were missing one of our best defensive players. Like,
No.
there's going to be other issues that crop up that are going to cost them against both Ohio State and Indiana, or even at Iowa. If they don't make the playoff at this point, that you can't just go back and say, oh, it's because we lost Tony. I mean,
Right.
that'll be a part of it, but there are these issues with this team that have been discussed ad nauseum,
Mhm.
and they need to correct them. And those issues existed after the Oregon game, when we didn't know Tony Rojas wasn't going to be a part of this defense moving forward.
Absolutely. He's a key cog, but like, it's got to be the cliche next man up mentality. And in order for Penn State to get where it needs to go, a lot more of the onus falls on the offense right now than anybody else. A reminder to everybody listening, we are live. We've already got a ton of comments, Johnny. So I think now is probably a good time. We've talked about the Rojas injury. We've talked a little bit about the CFP future. We both anticipate Penn State can still get there, and we both would predict them to.
Yeah.
So let's get into a couple of these questions, some comments. We got a lot going on here. So, and understandably so, I had a feeling that people would still be a little bit rankled. Bob used the word rankled on Monday about
It's
this
a good one.
loss. It is. So from Big Ten Spirit, do you think the reduced workload and limited reps through winter, spring ball, fall camp, and the bye week has something to do with why so many guys look totally unprepared for this season?
Ooh. I don't know. I think there is something to be said about the non-conference schedule. I don't know if it's the reduced workload, throughout the offseason, because that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't
Mhm.
situation. After Penn State played 16 games last year and had their season run through the second week of January, if you were to go back and say, okay, February comes around, winter workouts, we're going full bore, just like before, and then you pick up, a couple of major injuries because of these guys' muscles being stressed like crazy, or that happens in the spring if you're running these guys into the ground, or the summer. That I don't want to chalk up as
Yeah.
anything really. The non-conference slate, I think that's fair. Now, that's not something that is necessarily in James Franklin's control before this season. We know that they were supposed to play Virginia Tech, and that series got scrapped back in 2020. So I guess there was time, to try to get a power conference team on the slate. But you know what? They also didn't know they would be playing Oregon this early in the season. They didn't know that at that point. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that, like, you go into these games against these opponents like FIU, Nevada, Villanova, that you're favored to win by 40 plus points. You're supposed to do it. Like, you're supposed to be out. If you're Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, you kind of enter those games expecting to be hanging out on the bench by the third quarter. And the fact that they weren't in those games,
Yeah.
a little bit of a shock to the system, maybe. But I don't know. I think it was more of a game plan execution standpoint on the offensive end, in terms of the unpreparedness. Like, it looked like it was like, what the hell are we doing here? Than it was anything about like the players' bodies being physically ready for that moment.
I would agree. The only the thing that I'll say is if Penn State practices harder during the bye week, maybe we're talking about a Tony Rojas injury during the bye week. Those things happen. There's a reason why you take it easy on some veterans who have played a lot in spring ball and fall camp.
I mean, look at the snap count. Like, you and Bob talked about it. Like,
yeah.
Zaki Wheatley playing a billion snaps. Like, all these guys were out there for darn near the entire game and didn't come off the field against Oregon. So, like, if you know that those guys are going to be playing against a top, I mean, I think Oregon is one of the top teams in the country. A lot of people do. If you know going into a game that they're going to be playing all of those snaps, it does you no good to run them into the ground, just a week prior.
Yeah, I will say this: I've been thinking about going on to our Instagram and making a YouTube short and just kind of expressing this take. I didn't get around to doing it yesterday, but I guess I can do it here since we're on the live pod. I've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, but I've seen so many people say, "Oh my gosh, Penn State had 2 weeks to prepare for Oregon." Realistically, you had 9 months to prepare for Oregon because you had the 3 non-conference games against terrible opponents. I just don't put any stock in that. Like, it's not like having a bye week before a big game, in my opinion. I've said it a couple times, but unless you are an unhealthy team, unless you need guys to get right, I think it is an absolute detriment to have a bye week before a big game because you go out there. I mean, my experience does not go past high school football. I will say this, but the first game of the season, like, it's different. You have to kind of kick back into the feeling of like hitting somebody. Like it is absolutely different. And if you go a full week without doing it, that happens again. And you can't do that against a Big Ten opponent like Oregon, a big time opponent like Oregon. And I think you're right. Like, the non-conference schedule didn't help either because there was no rhythm there. There was no incentive to feel like you had to play your best because you just kind of dominated them anyway. And I think that absolutely probably contributed to the sluggish start for Penn State. So I just wanted to say, like, I am all the way out on bye weeks being an advantage because I just don't think they are unless your team is completely banged up and you need it for time to get healthy. And Penn State did not need that. So I certainly look at it as a disadvantage against Oregon.
Yeah, I see that. I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. One thing I'll add before we get to the rest of the comments, the idea that Penn State had 9 months to prepare for Oregon and they came out like that, I do think that's, there's some validity there. But my issue is not with necessarily how they prepared for those however many months or weeks or days, whatever you want to say. I think it was how slow they were to figure it out in game. Those, like, that was where it was lost. The fact that you're through 3 quarters and you have 109 offensive yards. Like, what are we doing? That's my biggest gripe with Andy Kotelnicki, with the offensive coordinator, with the play calling, with the offensive line. That's on Phil Troutwine. That's like, there's a lot of coaches who have to be held responsible there, and obviously the players aren't executing what the coaches think will work. But the fact that they were so slow and it took until 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter to wake up and finally have something that works, that's worse than coming in with a bad plan. It was if it was a bad plan, I mean, there were some execution issues as well early in that game, but it was how long it took for this staff and this team and this offense specifically to figure it out. Because by the time you got to the fourth quarter and you figured it out, by the time you got to overtime and you scored, the first touchdown in overtime and you figured it out, that defense is gassed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They're chalked. They're done. Like they have given everything already to keep it a 17-3 game going into the fourth quarter. So that's my biggest gripe. That's my biggest issue. It's not like there might be some validity. There might be some like understandably like, oh, we're pointing to, being able to prepare for this team for how long and all that. For me, it's the in-game adjustments and that failure that ultimately failed this offense and failed this team.
Yeah, 100% with you. And the only thing I'll say is like James Franklin did say they spent time on Oregon in the summer. So if anybody has great,
they always do that. That always happens. Of course. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I've seen a few people mention that maybe they didn't take that time and use it valuably. They did. It just didn't work out, and that's an indictment on the coaching staff and on the players' execution. Let's keep moving. Like I said, we've got a ton of comments, so I want to try and get to a few more of these before we make our predictions for the game. David Demkowski, appreciate you being here once again. Has Drew improved in any aspect in 2025? Seems like he got outplayed by sophomore Dante Moore on the road in a hostile environment. I will say Dante is a redshirt sophomore, but yeah, point still stands.
Yeah. I mean, no.
Yeah, I don't really have a long-winded answer to that. I think it's just no.
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, it's been 4 games and nothing that I've seen, and this isn't ragging on Drew Allar, but I'm also not a quarterback's coach, so maybe there are little things, whether it's his footwork or whatever else, but nothing that I've seen. And that opens up, David's question, throwing in Dante Moore in there. This is my opportunity to put my hand up and say, I did not think that Dante Moore, or I just didn't know that Dante Moore had that in him, because you look at just the numbers, but also just flip on the tape, man, and how he handled himself, making some of those throws on the run, putting the ball where it needed to be, and even that ballsy fourth down call by Dan Lanning to go play action pass and trusting your quarterback, like being able to trust your guy in that spot, told me a lot about who Dante Moore is as a quarterback. And I thought that the environment, the atmosphere, the big stage would get to him, and it certainly did not. If anything, he thrived on it. So kudos to Dante Moore. And if the Oregon fan or two that were in our chat last week has come back to reap the rewards and the apologies, hand up. I was wrong about Dante Moore, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't really have a take on Dante Moore, but I did think that the environment would get to him more, and it absolutely didn't. There's a reason why he is now the Heisman betting favorite, because that was an incredible performance. I'm just gonna say no on Drew. Like you said, I'm not a quarterback's coach, but it didn't feel through 4 games this season that he did anything this year better than he did it last year. And I would argue that he actually did a lot of things better last year than he did this year. Now, maybe some of that's Tyler Warren masking mistakes, but who knows? Next question.
We're also 4 games in, so that's the other thing too. Like obviously we're both like, I don't know if being down on the team is necessarily the right phrase, but at the same time, like they're coming off a loss that we both thought they would win, and they didn't look good through the majority of that game. So, but we are still only 4 games into this year, so there's time,
a lot of time
for him to continue to grow and continue to look better than he has so far.
Yeah. Another one from Big Ten Spirit. He still needs time to develop, but do we see LeVar Arrington II this year? I'll handle this one. I don't think so. I think if we were going to see him, we would have heard more about him since the start of the season, and he would have been included in James Franklin's answer last night. So no, I don't anticipate that. He's been on the scout team in practice every week. So I think he's a talented player. I think the staff really likes him. We heard great things in the offseason, but whether it's a physical or whether it's a grasping the scheme issue, or it even could be a positional fit. Like maybe they don't have him doing what Tony Rojas was doing. So no, I don't think we see him. let's see. I'm going through. We got a lot of comments, but not all of them are questions. So, all
Fair.
right, here,
Okay.
Broski Bear. This one is getting out into the future. Johnny, you may have a hot take here.
Okay.
If Penn State loses to Ohio State and Indiana, does Drew Allar get benched?
No. No. Um, no. Because also there's a chance that he's not the reason they lose those two games.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is under the premise that Drew looked like he did through three quarters against Oregon, against Ohio State and Indiana, and he is a primary reason why they didn't win those two ranked games. I still don't think he gets benched. No,
No.
because one, there's the outside chance that at 9-3, you could still get in. I don't think it would be likely because they wouldn't have a big game,
Right.
big win on their resume,
Mhm.
get into the CFP that is. But also the primary point being, James Franklin has always said he is a loyal guy.
Yes.
Sometimes loyal to a fault, but he is a
Yeah.
loyal guy, and he would. I don't think he would ever, injury notwithstanding, pull the plug on the Drew Allar experience this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. And also, flaws aside, Drew Aller at this moment gives you the best chance to win a game. I mean, you can get in you can get into any argument you want about poor performance to start the year. I do think some of it's on him, but I think a lot of it too that people are discounting is on an offensive line that has not held up a pocket, that has not opened up running lanes, that on Nick Singleton not breaking big runs and forcing teams to load up the box. I think it's on Andy Kotelnicki. Uh, I don't think Drew Aller has been good this year. Like I will put that plain and simple. He's missed way too many throws. He's missed some reads, but let's also pump the brakes on putting everything on his shoulders because
Yeah.
it is simply a dysfunctional offense through 4 games and has a lot of space to grow across the board, not just at quarterback. So no, I don't think even if you lose those 2 games, he gets benched. Maybe there's a world in which if they lose both of them by like 30, he gets benched, but I still don't even see that happening.
No.
Just because like he's a senior, he knows the offense. He gives you the best chance to win, and
Yeah.
that would, I mean, or I guess to peer into my crystal ball. I think if that was a reality and it happened, I'm pretty sure those are the exact words that would come out of James Franklin's mouth. He would say he gives us the best chance to win. So
Yeah,
I don't see it
I
happening.
don't see a world in which that happens.
No,
It could. I mean, they could lose those two games and finish 9-3, certainly. But the one thing I just wanted to add, Max, because you mentioned the offensive line, and we've mentioned the offensive line. I know you and Bob talked a lot about the offensive line. But what was the stat again? Was it 48% Drew was pressured on?
pressured. Yeah, I believe it was either 44 or 48. Yeah.
Either way, just about half the time he was dropping back to throw, he was pressured.
Mm-hmm. And not all of
That
those are the offensive line, but a lot of them are.
Yeah, I mean that can't happen.
Yeah.
That just can't happen. And now again, that is like when you're in third and obvious, throwing downs. Like there's a lot that goes into that when the running game isn't working. But that offensive line, Phil Troutwine, that group, they have the Joe Moore. I don't know if they still do, but in the summer they had the Joe Moore
Yeah.
award poster hanging in their position room because that was a goal for them to be the best offensive line in college football. And they don't look like a middling offensive line in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah.
They got a lot of work to do, and that's not me saying like they have the talent and the depth to get there to be one of the best units in the country, and they very well may get there. But right now they are not there after that Oregon game, so they need to figure their stuff out.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of follow up on that, Joel Nye asks, when does Phil Troutwine, as offensive line coach, get held accountable for the regression? And I don't like, he certainly needs to be. And I'm sure that, like, I guarantee you behind closed doors, James Franklin and Phil Troutwine are having a hell of a lot of conversations about what's gone on this year. But like, what I would say is just, this is really jarring because this was such a good offensive line. Like post Ohio State last year, they were destroying people on the ground. And they weren't just destroying like your Rutgers, your Maryland on the ground. Like everybody, we talked how much about them running for 300 yards on Oregon's defensive line. They at the start of the Notre Dame game were really crushing the Irish on the ground too. This was a really good offensive line last year. It's almost unexplainable what's happened. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it comes down to Andy Kotelnicki's tried to get too cute with them up front. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just trying to find an explanation for what happened because it's the same damn 5 guys who were here last year.
Or maybe Andy was getting cute because he knew that he couldn't run the ball straight up.
Yeah,
that was a takeaway of mine. Whereas like all these jet sweeps and obviously the fake kind of like toss, almost like shovel sweep, worked in the end. Like that was a great play call.
Yeah.
But maybe these jet sweeps and everything are being used to mask what is a deficiency on the offensive line. Another, the question was about Phil Troutline, but another position coach I want to kind of put under the microscope here. I know that we have a lot to get to still, but is Danny O'Brien.
I got time today, Johnny. I got time.
You got time.
Take prime out, to take a prime quote there. I got time today.
Got time today. Do you see Shedeur being
okay, not on topic at all, but
not on topic at all, but you brought up Dion.
What is that? It's just terrible. Like I don't know who his PR guy is or who his agent is, but my God, like not good. And then you get Dylan Gabriel who goes up to the podium and like says all the right things. Anyway, let's talk about we're talking about Danny O'Brien.
Danny O'Brien, yeah. If this doesn't work out the way Penn State wants it to work out with Drew at the end of the season, we're going to be having a conversation about Danny O'Brien, I think. And I think it's a little, I don't know, maybe preemptive that we're there right now that I bring him up. But I think just to kind of set the stage before we get to the Ohio State game, before we get to the Indiana game, before we get to what I still think an eventual CFP appearance and potential run, if Drew doesn't fix the issues and look like a competent quarterback, let alone a projected first round pick.
Yeah.
If that doesn't get corrected, we're going to be having a conversation about like, was Danny O'Brien the right guy to really, to really usher in this 5-star quarterback who everyone thought was going to be the savior of the program and elevate this program and XYZ. It's another one that we have to look at. And again, I'm not a quarterbacks coach, but I'm saying that, you could be looking at some offseason conversations around that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think depending on how this season progresses, and again, we're a lot
it's early
right now. We're
4 games in. 4 games in.
Yeah. The whole the season is still in front of Penn State. Absolutely, still believe that they will go 10-2. I'm just preparing.
They could beat Ohio State. Like they could.
They could go 11.
I feel like both of us are. It would be honestly like kind of the most Penn State thing to happen.
I texted a couple of friends about that this weekend. They're like, "Oh my gosh, they're going to lose to Ohio State, Indiana," and I was like, "Okay, but also like, wouldn't it really be classic if they beat Ohio State this year?"
It would be finally like everyone. I shouldn't say everyone because a lot of people still withheld their doubts. Had their doubts and judgments and everything. But I feel like at least a lot of us as a collective that had doubted James Franklin and this program in terms of, hey, can they do it? Can they do it? Get over that hump. Like going into the Oregon game, a lot of us picked Penn State because we thought that it was finally time to get over that hump. And then after they don't, it's like, well, it'll never happen. It would be the most like backwards ass thing to ever happen for them to go out and beat Ohio State, which is still possible. So we're talking about like if they finish 10-2, they could easily finish 11. Like they could finish 11-1, feasibly. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't either.
But I don't know. Maybe I should have waited to bring up Danny O'Brien until after the Ohio State game to see how Drew played in that moment. But I did anyway, and so here we are.
Yeah, no, I think your point's valid though, because I just what I was going to say is while everything is still on the table this year, and like I will continue to pump the brakes on everybody like saying the season's over because it's just not. This season, depending on how it turns out, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is going to cause it's going to turn into a lot of self-reflection for Penn State and James Franklin in the offseason, because you have the most talented offense on paper. Like maybe I don't know. You have Saquon and Trace those years ago, but like from a recruiting perspective, like Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, 2 5-stars, Luke Reynolds a 5-star. You bring in these transfer wide receivers, like it's at least up there with those 16 and 17 years as far as on paper how good this offense should be. And if it's not that, I do think it turns into some self-reflection. But we got a long way to go. Let's just close the book on the Drew Allar talk right here, Johnny, with one more question that everybody in our comments are going off about right now. And I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but I'm not surprised the question is coming up. I just kind of want to nip it in the bud. Beau versus Drew, who would you rather have? And is there an aspect of this that Andy Kotelnicki's offense does not properly fit Drew Allar right now?
Yeah, I don't know. Andy Kotelnicki, Saturday night through 3 quarters notwithstanding, my understanding of him as a play caller, obviously he had the success with Jalen Daniels, at Kansas, but he is a smart guy. He knows how to win with a lot of different kinds of players. And like there was success last year. They had success last year. It wasn't always perfect, obviously, but so I don't think that necessarily like Beau is a better fit for Andy's offense. I mean, like if you're just looking at what he did with Jalen Daniels at Kansas, sure. But entering this year, I would have taken the upside on Drew Allar, 10 times out of 10 over Beau. And I've been impressed with what Beau has done at Missouri,
same.
with the caveat that they haven't really played anybody yet. I mean, that's what,
especially like a real defense. They've been in a couple of barn burners, but
right. I don't want to. And again, like some anti-Drew Allar people will say, like, well, prior to the Oregon game, Drew Allar didn't play anyone this season, and still, but
but he did last year. Like he had good moments last year.
Yeah, I'll read off, Missouri's opponents so far. Central Arkansas, Kansas, which is a rivalry game.
Yeah, it is. But
Louisiana Lafayette
defense in it.
No, Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns. South Carolina, which I think a lot of people kind of identified as frauds pretty early this season. They've got one good defensive player, Dylan Stewart, very good defensive player. But aside from that, pretty mid. And then UMass. I think we're going to find out a lot. And I like having spoken to Beau over the years, and like we all have, like he's a good kid, a good guy. Like hope he does well, at Missouri. Yeah. But I think we're going to find out a lot about him when they go up against Alabama, when they go up against even at Auburn. Vanderbilt is low-key. I mean, they don't really play much defense, but they're a fun team. A&M's defense, Oklahoma and Brent Venables. Like, I think we're going to find out a lot about the Beau experience at Missouri, obviously, right? Like, there's a lot of football to be played there too. On the other end, we talk about a lot of football being played for Drew Allar. I think there's a lot of football to be played for Beau Pribula. To answer the question, no, I think you would still take Drew. If you were given what would happen over these first 4 or 5 weeks of the season before the year, and say, okay, you saw what Beau just did for Missouri, and you've seen what Drew has done, I still think you take Drew. And I might be. People might call me wrong for that. That's fine, but I still think you take Drew.
Look, if we're sitting at the end of the season and Beau's got Missouri fighting for a CFP spot, or if he's sitting in New York for the Heisman ceremony, you guys keep the receipts and come show them to us gladly. But I'm with you. Like even right now, I'd still take Drew over Beau. And I will. I agree with everything you said. What I'll further this for, or what I will further this conversation with. James Franklin debunked the idea that Drew is not as good of a fit for Andy Kotelnicki's offense. He says it's a pro style offense. I don't see it that way. And I mean, I think it is. I think people get into the weeds on the motions, the creativity and stuff, and say, oh, well, a mobile quarterback really could take this to the next level. Yeah, I mean, sure, there could be some wrinkles in it if you have a guy like Beau, like there were last year, but nothing that they do is hindered by what Drew Allar can do as a quarterback. And also, I think people do discount how well Drew can actually run. He's not Beau running the ball, but he's serviceable. And that's important. And I do think moving forward, we will see more of that, more design stuff for him. Go ahead.
One other quick point is if you dropped Beau into this offense with the offensive line issues, with the running game not going, one thing that's helping Beau a lot so far at Missouri is that Ahmad Hardy is maybe the best running back in college football.
Yeah.
Like just flip it on and he is awesome. Also, that offensive line has played well after losing Armand Membu to the NFL draft after last season. That's been a surprise to me. But again, it's competition. Like Central Arkansas, Kansas, I mean, freaking UMass.
Yeah,
we're like, I swear, I am not doubting that Beau can get it done in like the heart of the SEC, but we're going to find out a hell of a lot more about how good he is really as a quarterback over the next couple months.
Yeah. Okay, maybe he is a better fit for Penn State's offense if Drew's going to be pressured on 48% of his snaps.
Yeah, maybe.
If he can get out of the pocket better. But until Drew Allar has a fully functioning group around him, and which he simply has not had to this point, until they lean into Katron Allen, until they have an offensive line that's performing, then we can have discussions about Drew Allar. But right now, I would still take Drew over Beau. I understand that fans are gonna fan how you want to fan. Like if you want to see change, absolutely do it. Johnny, I think you and I probably have some similar hot takes about some of our favorite sports teams. The Phillies, the Cubs. Certainly get some hot takes going here and there. Fan how you want to fan, Penn State fans, but for us, I think Drew Allar is still the answer. Let's see. There was one more that I wanted to get to. Jeff Walliser Jr. Essentially, the question is Penn State looking for an offensive coordinator in the offseason. That's not happening. Unless Andy Kotelnicki is a head coach somewhere. But, with the way this year has started, I don't think he would be. But they're not going to fire Andy Kotelnicki. So, he's contributing to the problem, but he is not the problem currently. Once they figure things out, I think everybody will be singing his praises again like last year. Okay, Johnny, that was 40 minutes worth of questions. We still have some predictions to get to. I do want to say, thank you for all these questions because the comments make this a lot of fun. I know, Johnny, you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
It's a blast to have ongoing conversation. So let's keep that rolling throughout the season. And let's make some predictions. Okay. Let me read quickly what Bob and Joe gave us. So Bob Flounders, he says his players on the spot against UCLA, the offensive line. And I think this is going to be a key here, a trend here among our predictions. The offensive line needs to get better. And he says, love what Bob did. He said he points directly at the offensive line. He says, guys, we're waiting, ... Fair enough. Don't be surprised if the Bruins make James Franklin's team work to gain separation. UCLA has nothing to lose, and Penn State started slow in its California date with USC last season. Lions pull away in the third quarter. His prediction is Penn State 30, UCLA 3. And then let's get to Joe Hermit, our photographer extraordinaire. He says UCLA limps in with the worst run defense in the Big Ten, actually fourth worst in the country for those keeping score at home. So his goes to the offensive line and the entire run game. Don't be surprised if an angry Penn State team actually covers the point spread for the first time this year. Okay, interesting call there, Joe. He calls UCLA a dumpster fire and picks Penn State 41-10. Johnny, let's get to yours.
Can I just co-sign all that?
Yeah, exactly.
UCLA is a dumpster fire. No, my players on the spot, offensive line, it's in a get-right spot. UCLA allowing 232.8 rushing yards per game, 133rd out of 136 FBS teams. If this group cannot move bodies against the Bruins, they never will. That's a real hot take, but this is a real opportunity for them to open things up for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, which is why my don't be surprised if, like James Franklin after the Oregon game, I am now sounding like a broken record because I have picked my do not be surprised if Nick Singleton breaks a long run. I've used that I think a few times so far this
At
season.
least twice this season.
It's at least twice. It's going to happen. UCLA has allowed 7 runs of 20-plus yards through 4 games, most of any Big Ten team. Nick Singleton also, he likes playing in the Rose Bowl. Remember that 87-yard run he had against Utah? That was pretty fun.
That was.
I think he's going to have one of those moments against UCLA. Maybe not 87 yards, but at least 30 yards, man.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, look, I don't think this is going to linger. I think this is a spot where I don't think the Oregon loss is going to linger. I think this is a spot where, they get, like we mentioned, they get out of town, they get out on the West Coast and they come out, and I don't think they start slow. I think this is a take your frustrations out kind of game against a team that could very easily finish 0-12. UCLA is that bad.
Yeah,
they are that bad, and I'm not going to really take much out of this game personally. If Nick Singleton goes out there and breaks the long run that I expected, and the offensive line moves bodies like I expect, that's not going to change my thinking for the Ohio State game in a month necessarily. But for their confidence, they need to do it. And so I've got Penn State winning 45-10, and I think the UCLA touchdown is a late one. We talked about how many guys played how many snaps against Oregon. James Franklin and his coaching staff are going to be hoping this is an opportunity to get younger guys in the game as early as possible and limit those reps on their top guys.
Yeah, so this is kind of the quintessential get-right game, right?
It is, yeah.
Just because of how bad UCLA is. I mean, fired head coach, offensive coordinator's gone, the defensive coordinator's gone too. Just a little bit of a crazy circumstance over there. And this is a team that coming into the season, we didn't necessarily expect them to compete in the Big Ten. We kind of thought maybe they'd have some juice, bringing in Nico Iamaleava and a couple of transfers on offense. Maybe they could go, 6-6 and win an interesting game here and there. It's just not the case right now.
Max, I thought going into the season, I think we talked about this game, and I was saying hey, it'll be a showcase between two of the at least what we consider to be two of the best quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah.
And Nico, man, we don't have to dive into his decision, but looking like a bad one.
Yeah, looking like a bad one. Okay, my players on the spot. So we actually write these mid-afternoon, morning on Wednesdays, just for everybody to know. So I guess I had some special intuition here because I went with Anthony Specca and Alex Tash, the linebackers, which are now even more in the spotlight. My rationale was I had a lot of concern about the fact that Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell simply didn't come off the field against Oregon. And so my point in picking these guys was this is the game where they have to play a lot and show something for Penn State. And now that Rojas is injured, it just becomes all the more important. So those are my players on the spot. And we could also include Cam Smith in that as well. I expect him to make his debut this weekend. I don't be surprised if I'm giving Katron a 100-yard game here this weekend. I just think Bob talked about his Thanksgiving table, his adult Thanksgiving table on Monday. For anybody who hasn't seen the podcast yet, it's right near the end, and it's a great analogy. Got to give the studs all the food at the adult table, and the rest of them can sit at the kiddie table and get the scraps. Katron Allen's got to be sitting at the head of the adult table for me moving forward. He's been so good. I think he's been Penn State's best offensive player by a wide margin. And I think against a horrible UCLA run defense, he should cross the 100-yard mark. Look, I think Penn State's going to start slow again offensively, which I know the fans don't want to hear, but long trip to the West Coast, which affects teams on the East Coast more than it does West Coast teams coming east. James Franklin said that this week. I think it's going to be a brief factor, and I do think that the hangover from the whiteout loss will exist. But I'm taking Penn State to dominate the middle eight once again and eventually wind up with a very comfortable 34-7 win. That's where I'm at.
Fair enough. So you do not have them covering.
What's even the number? I didn't look it up.
Last I checked, I guess this was Tuesday night, so it might have moved since. But when I looked Tuesday night, it was 25.5.
That would be a cover then. That's a 27-point spread, 34-7. Math here, Johnny. Math.
I need more of my coffee.
Drink more of that coffee, buddy.
I'll shut up. I spent yesterday listening to AJ Brown for God knows how long, talking about his cryptic tweet. And that was a long day at the NovaCare complex, and so I needed this coffee, and I did not have it before the podcast. My math was bad. Sorry. Do we all pick a cover?
Yeah, I believe we all did. And
they have not covered yet this season. They have not covered.
Yeah, so. No. I think Bob's got him at 27. You're at 35, and Joe is at 31. So that is a cover, and that might be the first time all season that all four of us picked them to cover as well, because I do think that every game this year so far, one of us has not picked them to cover. And so at least one of us has been right on that sense.
The line has actually moved, by the way, to 24.5. So you're even more in the clear than you already were.
Okay. So, yeah, there you go. Look, we're 50 minutes into this. Look, there actually was, Johnny, there was one more question that I wanted to hit on briefly, because I think it's worth mentioning. I'm sure we missed a couple of questions. Sorry, folks, if we did, because this has been our most poppin' chat of the year, for sure. Great crowd. But Jeff Walliser Jr. said, this loss kind of feels like it's hurt more than others in the past. Do we agree, Johnny? Do we feel like this has lingered a little more, and why?
Yeah, I mean, from a fan perspective, if he's talking about a fan perspective, like this one hurting more than some of the past, and I don't want to speak for the players on this, so like I'll leave it from a fan perspective, because I've talked to a lot of them, since even halftime of Saturday's game, and then since then. I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it goes into a lot of different things. One, this was the biggest whiteout that Penn State has had in quite some time in the buildup, like knowing that.
I would argue ever.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument, that this might have been, and probably is, the biggest whiteout ever. And so that right then and there, like the come down from that, the way it ended, the way this team was talked about in the preseason. I mean, the way that I talked about them, the way you talk, like a lot of people, talking about this team as a national title contender. Like, we haven't really had that, for this program. Last year it was, they were expected, hey, this is finally the year they're going to make the playoff and maybe make a run, because it was the first year of the 12-team format. They get to the semifinal, and then all these guys come back. And we don't need to totally relitigate why they were a national title contender in the preseason and why they still may or may not be. But those expectations made that game hurt. And the familiarity with which the game went made that hurt. It was the same old story. And a lot of fans thought this team would be different in that atmosphere. They thought Drew Allar would be a different quarterback. They thought James Franklin would be a different coach. They thought a lot of things would be different about that game, and they weren't. And so that's where I think that's where a lot of the pain stems from, is that, like, they've seen this before, and they had hoped and prayed and believed that it would be different. And it still can be moving forward. But, in terms of just why that loss sucks so much for a lot of people, I think that's why.
Yep, I think you nailed it. Like, I will say, somebody in the comments said this, and I think it's the correct point. Like, this was the first time since 2019 that there was a whiteout that meant something. I mean, the Auburn whiteout meant something. I mean, that was a big game. That was a big whiteout. It was nighttime against an opponent it was a good game, but this was in the conference. This was a rematch of the Big Ten championship. And like, this was the most highly anticipated whiteout in history. And it was the first one that really like had that aura to it since the whiteouts against Michigan and Ohio State. They've played at home every game against Michigan and Ohio State at noon since Fox took over the broadcast rights. This was the big one. And with all the expectations coming into the season, it's pretty easy, in my opinion, to see why this one hurt more. Just because I think everybody's hopes were up. I really think that the fans had high hopes, and in the atmosphere, in the entire buildup, that one's hard to come down from.
And Max, who knows when the next time Penn State is going to have
Mm-hmm.
another whiteout of this
Yeah,
magnitude. You look at 2026, right? Their biggest home game. I mean, their home schedule is Minnesota, Purdue, Rutgers, USC, Wisconsin,
yeah.
and
So it's like,
obviously Buffalo and Marshall. So like, it's probably USC next year, and that's
but that
probably
also,
not
it depends
I,
on the broadcast. Like, it has to
right,
be at night. Penn State has made
right,
clear they're not doing a whiteout if it's not at night. So
yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, maybe Penn State USC slips through Fox's
yeah,
clause
right.
and lands on NBC again. But I mean, NBC had the fourth pick this year behind Fox's first three picks in terms of the games. That'll be flipped next year, where CBS will get. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's how it works. And they can trade
Yeah,
as well, so it's a
yeah.
little convoluted. But suffice to say, you don't like USC is probably not a top six team next year, and that's
Mm-hmm.
probably your biggest home game. And yeah, it might not even be at night. So yeah, this was an opportunity missed. We all know. I mean, we know that,
Yeah.
the fans know that, the players know that, the coaches know that. This was an opportunity missed on many levels, and we'll see if it affects them on Saturday against UCLA. Max,
Yeah.
we'll both be watching from home. We know Bob and Joe will be out there in
Yep.
LA, providing our coverage for Penn Live. So follow them. Joe, obviously, with all of his videos and photos, is always great. So he'll be capturing the scene at the Rose Bowl. But obviously, we'll be writing off the game as well, providing our thoughts, observations, everything you would ever want. So
Yeah.
be sure to tune in. Be sure to join us next week too, next Thursday. I know that
Mm-hmm.
obviously this game, the Oregon game, you know, provided so many opinions, like just produced so many thoughts on this team moving forward and everything. But we have a lot of fun doing this every Thursday afternoon. We
Mm-hmm.
love your interaction and your thoughts. So it's always good, to get a bunch of people in the chat and chop it up. So let's keep this rolling all throughout the season. Plenty to talk about.
Yeah, well said, Johnny. Look, we're not anticipating much sweat for Penn State and its fans this weekend. UCLA is terrible. You mentioned the atmosphere at the Rose Bowl, the scene. I don't know what kind of scene there's gonna be. I mean, that
I
that
think
school that school has struggled to put butts in seats even when they've been a decent team. With what's going on right now, I don't. There might not even be 5,000 fans there.
I think there's gonna be a lot of Penn State fans though.
That's true. Penn State
Now
fans always show up.
some might be regretting buying their flights after watching the Oregon game, but there will be
Yeah.
no. I joke. Penn State travels really well, and that's an easy sell to go to LA, go back to the Rose
Oh
Bowl.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Although I've been told by many people that at least for the Rose Bowls in recent past, the concessions area, like everything when it's packed, is really tough to get around.
So
And not necessarily great, but I don't think it's going to be packed. I think it's
no,
going to
I
be
don't. Yeah.
it's going to be a pro Penn State crowd this weekend. So
Yeah.
that's what I expect.
Much
And I
like it
expect,
was at USD last year, I would say.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. This has been a fun show. A lot of topics to hit on. Tony Rojas, a lot of Drew Allar discussion, some picks for the UCLA game. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the pod on YouTube, on Spotify, on whatever you listen, watch on. Appreciate you being here live. Make sure you go subscribe to PennLive.com. Got a long season ahead of us, at least 8 more games. And I would say probably more in the range of 10 at least, probably double digit more games. So keep tracking with us. Make sure you're subscribing, following. Appreciate